again, like another example is, remember those two young black gentlemen in Philadelphia in the Starbucks? Right? Now, how many people come in, sit down, wait for the other people, the people in the party, you know, before they order?
Oh, everybody.
Everybody. Everybody, you know. But they stopped these two young gentlemen. They were waiting for a third party. They were working on business. There was a business deal that they were going to work on. Two young businessmen. And there was this, you know, so they called police. Now there was a young woman, any video, there was a young white woman sitting there, and she started to video the whole thing. And you could even hear her behind the camera, like, you know, they've done nothing wrong. But the person in Starbucks, they called the police. Why? Why would you call the police? You know, there's this thing about being singled out because you're black. So, and then the businessman who was white, who was having the meeting with these young guys, he comes in and goes, what's going on? I know these two young men, you know, we're going to have a meeting. They didn't pay any attention to him because the police, once they make up their mind, they don't want to be wrong about anything. Right. So they, you know, went ahead and arrested two young men for sitting in Starbucks waiting for the third party to come in. That's all. Now, the young woman who videotaped the whole thing, the white businessman who stood up for his young business partners, that's what allyship looks like. That's what being, what was our accomplice? That's what being an accomplice. You don't stand by and let something happen without standing up and saying something, videotape it, whatever it is that you can do in the moment, you do that. I had my own personal experience with that, standing in Giant Eagle. There was a young black woman who was having a heated argument with the cashier about something, whatever it was. And I think she felt embarrassed or something. Maybe the card was rejected. I have no idea. But I was standing a couple rows over in the back, towards the back. And they were, you know, she was upset, and the cashier was trying to explain something to her. There was a gentleman, if we can call him that, in a wheelchair that was in the same line, okay? And he said to the black woman, what are you, you know, what are you, how are you talking to her? I don't like how you're talking to her. You know, how dare you talk to her like that? And then called her an a-hole. Oh. Yes. Oh, that's part one. He took his cart that was in front of him, the wheelchair, and rammed it into her cart. Okay? Then she responded. She said, you know, this is none of your business, etc. But he was the aggressor. Would you say? Mm-hmm. He was the aggressor, right? He took her cart and she pushed back. Okay? Because when he pushed the cart hit her. And so she forcibly pushed the cart back, right? Then the white Marine type guy came running over and going, hey, now everybody's attention was on her. Nobody paid attention to what the guy was doing. Nobody. There was a black woman that was standing behind me in the store, and she quietly moved over to another part of it. She didn't want anything to do with it. And you know what? People do react that way, you know? So now they're calling the manager, all for her. And she's trying to explain what happened, and nobody listened to her. I went over, tapped the manager. He was like 6'7". It was like as high as I could reach. I was tapping him. I said, you know, excuse me, sir, But this gentleman sitting over here is the one that called her name and pushed his cart into hers. And so he said, okay, sir, he gets that respect, right? Now all of a sudden he's quiet. He knows how to play the game. He's the victim, right? And so we'll move you over to another aisle, and meanwhile, the black woman who was being tormented is all I can say. It's interesting to see how people react. Some people, not just the black woman behind me, they all just like moved over somewhere else, but nobody stood up. What they might have put her in jail for something. Here's the thing, and this is very, very old. White people don't listen to black people. That goes back to enslavement time. Okay? And so because you have no value, that is something, and it is a subconscious, unconscious. When we talk about subconscious and unconscious bias, that's what we mean. And so you have to remember, you can be two things at the same time. You can be the most wonderful, kind, loving person, and you can have subconscious bias at the same time. You can be two things in one, all right? So what we're working on here is to get to whatever subconscious or unconscious biases you may have. And everyone does, everyone does. So that's the point of all of this. And the allyship video, allies are all lies, I love some of the things that they had to say. Does anyone here have a comment on that? Any comments that they made on the video that struck you in a particular way?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for introducing me. And it seems like others may have seen the videos before, but I thought it was spectacular as well. Patricia, I was thinking about things you have taught us even in the first class of this series, and about the human race, and about family and what that means. And again, just the repetition of that, the thing that Dr. King would talk about, injustice to one is injustice to all. But to let that seep in a bit further. And as the talk was there, and I was thinking about family, like even one's immediate family. Like if an immediate family member, the blood family, is being mistreated, how do we step up? And then how do we then expand that to our neighbors, people that we know? But if we have a paradigm that says we are all that, and that to me is always, it's a work in progress. It's a challenge to say, if we start with that place, then it takes us to a different place. In terms of what we say and don't say.
Right, absolutely.
The other comment I thought that you said in the first class, which many things you said I so appreciated, but about and this is my interpretation, let's start where we're at. We can't be somewhere where we wish we were. We are here. And to be honest with that, and not to be afraid of that, but to move within love, not fear. To say, how can I, Charlie, be a better version of myself in this? So I thought the video kept those messages going, and it's an extension of what you have been saying all along. So thank you.
Oh, very well said. Very well said. They are actually doing the work, and that's why I keep pulling that video. It's one of my favorite videos. They speak very plainly. They talk about some of their experiences, and I always bring it back to, we have the Civil Rights Bill, we have the Voting Rights Bill, we have the Housing Bill, because black people didn't do something when it was convenient. You know, well, you know, I got something else to do. This class is to help challenge you to really think about what is important right now. You know, well, you know, my brother-in-law, this is going to be, we're having a party for him today, so I can't come to the class. It's like, you know, okay, I mean, everybody has to make their you know, decisions. But it's important that you really think about, okay, now, where has this been offered to you before for free, where you can, huh?
At the library, there are so many books on this, and so many discussion groups, that we just, I'm sorry if no one else has ever taken advantage of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I personally, I'm sorry, here I am gonna rant myself. I take offense when you talked earlier about white people and black people. There is so much that we can do, and there's so many of us in this room that are probably very understanding and very sympathetic for various reasons in our lives. And I wanted to point out, it came explicitly, because I didn't catch you before, but this afternoon at the UU Church on Hilliard, there's I'm sure some of us in this room know about the music settlement program in, wherever they call it down there where all the universities are, University Circle. And one of their emphasis is diversity and black music, black composers. And my own little thing right now is there's something called spiritual royalties. All the spirituals, for instance, we sang one in church this morning at the end, I'm going to be where God can use me. That's a spiritual. There is no author. There's nobody to give royalties to that person, because that song was created by the workers in the fields and in the sugarcane areas or any place where they were put down, kept down. And that's what they use the spirituals to sing, to give themselves hope and courage. And the thought is, since there is no one that we can give royalties to, that we can make a collection or somehow give money to an organization that does promote and like the music settlement. Anyway, that's, and I guess I personally am offended when you lump all white people together. I don't get it.
Can I say something?
Yes, you may.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but the thing is still going on. I know that it's not everybody, but how is she gonna put it across? It is still going on. Somehow we need to speak out. Maybe she might say some, but majority is still going on. Like when she said, you can do this, but you can have the other man and say, okay, I'm not gonna do it. There's some hidden agenda which we cannot really post mine. I've been here in this country more than 30 years. Yeah, it's not everybody that are the same, but those things are still going on. How are we gonna put it across? If we are gonna just say, point down black and white, it's still going on. We still have to talk about it. And yeah, it's a pity. That's the term we are going to use, white and black, because it's still going on. It's not everybody that is the same. The same thing with the blacks, not everybody that is the same. But we have to put the message across. Yeah, it might be offended. I felt that sometimes, and I look at some of our people, I say, okay, not, I have so many white friends, and they're going to be offended. I don't know how she's going to put it, but it's still going on, I'm sorry.
Oh,
but that's the way we have to continue talking about these things.
Oh, I don't deny I'm talking about them, but there's some little things that we can do. And like what I'm talking about, this little project, is something that we can do.
So, first of all, I think it's white people, we have to stop being offended. You know, because that stops us from listening. So, and that's our first instinct, right? Don't blame me, I'm not part of this. And then you stop listening. But what I've learned in this courses is we are all guilty of unconscious bias, all of us. And so the more you listen and the more you're open to that, the more you understand where you can improve, and we all can improve, absolutely, and how we can be a better ally. And that's what this class is all about. It's about truly understanding the history, understanding where well-intentioned white people go down the wrong path for whatever reason, make the wrong decisions, and then be an ally to speak up. And so, and right from the beginning, she said, throw away your guilt. This is not about being guilty. This is not about being offended. This is about learning. So, you know, as a fellow white person, I just say to you, when you feel that offense, try to think through that, why you're feeling offended, and because that's going to prevent you from listening. You're going to put up a barrier, and you're going to stop listening. And racism is here, and racism is prevalent, and we are not improving in great strides in this country, truly aren't. Not as much as we want to. And we can't get there until white people become true allies. And that's what this class is all about. It's like, they can't do it on their own. If we, the majority in this company, don't become allies, we're never gonna get there, ever. So, that's...
I agree with you completely.
Hands. See, this is the reason I'm having this class. I want to see these hands. Yes.
A concept that it was new to me over the last, 10, 20 years is the concept of white privilege, which, what it means isn't new, but the depth of it and the way, the richness is the wrong connotation of it, is, I think, so important now, as even if I'm in exactly the same place as a person of color, I got there much more easily than they did, and I'm going to stay there much more easily than they did, and that's so. To me, tearing back the layers of my worldview that I've grown up with, this is normal. This is how this happens. This is how you get there. Because of my limited exposure to people and cultures and so on. I think that's critically important as part of this, for us to do that examination, white people to do that examination of, I may not feel privileged, I may feel sad or poor or picked on or something, but I'm still privileged compared to a person of color who has to go out into the world and be treated as a person of color. I'm not the person lacking color. It's that other people are people of color. So I am privileged, and I need to carry that with the awareness of that with.
One of the things that struck me, sorry, what is your name?
Maureen.
Maureen. When Maureen was talking about the guilt, the shame, I've been doing this book study with some folks at Forest Hill Church, and we've been through the United States. And in our conversation yesterday, there was this talk that especially among church people, white church people, there is this move to feeling guilt, to feeling shame. And we were unpacking that a little bit and what you do with that. And what I heard one of the folks in the video, and I don't think they caught this the first time because I did watch it in the fall as well, But one of the folks last night saying, you don't get anywhere if you're doing this out of guilt or out of shame. It's when you get to the point where you're doing it out of love, because Charlie, as you were saying, as they were saying on the Zoom chat, if we truly believe we are all family and we're all our brothers and sisters and need to be loving and taking care of each other, when we get to the point where we're doing it from that motivation, rather than, oh my gosh, I'm a guilty white person, like you're saying, with white privilege, we acknowledge that. We have to get beyond, I guess, the motivation for why we are doing what we're doing, as we are trying to be doing better.
Excellent. Yeah.
I think the other thing that's important is white people have the power. So yeah, while it's not all white people who, like there are good, decent, like helpful white people who want change, the majority of the power in this country is in the hands of white people. And so the constituents who are of the same skin color as those people in power are pushing the people around them to do better and the people in power to do better, then we can really start getting somewhere. But it has to be out of that love. But the power is like, yeah, there are good white people, but a lot of bad white people are in power. And we as hopefully good white people can influence some sort of change from a ground level in that.
And, excuse me, and also if you feel that way, you can say, okay, I am not like that. Like me as a color person, I get offended because I feel like, why are we still talking about this in the 21st century? Why are we still feeling like it? The same way some of my friends felt, white people, okay, we are not like that. But at the same time, we, the color people, are saying, why is this still going on? Why are we still talking about this? Why can't they still get it? We felt that way too, you know. And it's kind of frustrating. And no matter what we are doing, putting more effort, trying to be up there, some of them, they still have a way of putting us down. So it's two ways. Yeah.
Yeah, we're still living in an era where we're having districts gerrymandered deliberately to put minorities in certain ways, so that if you have a vote going one way, but the smaller vote ends up having more districts, because that's keeping people of white color in power longer despite the demographic change in the country, then there has to be a generalized conversation about the people who have the power who are doing that. And as a white person, that is us in general. We have to have this conversation directed to us. I mean, how many times have white people direct conversations to minorities specifically, usually in arrogance? So it is our turn to have a conversation directed generally to us. All of us are learning something new that some of us are more, have been more educated than others on this subject in the past, but there's always something new that we didn't know before. And that is going to help us all out. This is one of the hardest subjects to address in this day and age. And there's a lot of, wonderful, true-hearted, good intentional, people who, it's still a hard subject to communicate. And that's why it's, good that, put aside, I like what you said about, I think the most important thing you said about this is the putting aside the guilt, because I think that it's been the hardest thing to get people to realize. Because that is exactly, I think, what the defense has been is, oh, they're trying to make you feel guilty. Well, no, let's set that aside and let's actually discuss the issues. We just have to not feel so vulnerable, and we have to be willing to take in this new information, realize what is happening now, what has happened before. Otherwise, you can't move forward, and this period that we're in right now, which is still a pretty dark period, we're never going to get out of it unless we go through the hard steps with this. So it may seem generalizing, to everybody in the white race, but it really needs to be, because that's the only way we're going to be able to address the issue. And I think forums like this have been an excellent means to address it.
Couple thoughts that I want to add. One, absolutely, Joy, I get where you're coming from, because there are moments in conversations like this where I sit and I say, I'm not like that. Like I'm not one of those white people. But that's, my saying that is the definition of white privilege, right? It's, no, that's not me, so I'm not gonna listen to this conversation anymore because I don't think it applies to me. But the reality is I'm a product of my culture, right? And my culture has, over generations, taught me that I am superior to people of color. And everything about my culture that surrounds me just, institutes that into me, right? So I keep getting reminded that I need to not assume that I'm not one of those people, because there are points in time when I can be one of those people, right? So I have to own that and just be on guard, be on the lookout, be reflective about those points in time, and just there are points in time when, yes, I can have racist tendencies, because that's just how I've been formed in a lot of ways. So that's the first piece of it. The second is I'm kind of struck when we talk about white people having the power and making sure that we can use that power for change. And there was that point in the video where they were talking about having to remove white people and whiteness from the center and put black people in the center. So I think it's less about our promoting or prompting change from within, and more about bringing black people into the center to create that change. Right? The spotlight's not on us white people to make change. We should be shifting that spotlight or pulling up a seat, like at that table of power, and saying, this belongs to somebody who's not here. They get a chance to speak.
Very good, very good. Abraham, you made that comment about good white people and bad white people. I would like to alter that to conscious and unconscious. Okay? So people with a level who are more open are willing to listen and internalize what they're hearing, and then try to put that in their daily lives. And I would put that under conscious. Okay? Unconscious people, I don't like to think of them as bad. I don't. We have to, if we really understand, like next time when we meet, I'm going to talk about education in this country. It's really important. Education. So you have to understand that all of this information has been kept from people for hundreds of years. The most important thing is to ask why. Why that, and even today, this information is being squashed. Especially today. Exactly. Now, if you do that, see, because whoever has the power, has the narrative, who runs the narrative has the power. Okay? So the white people in power, status quo, which is them in power, they realize that if the citizens of this country actually understood what has happened, that they would be outraged. And so how do you keep them sleeping? You continue to give them more stuff. You keep the truth away from them. See, when they say truth will set you free, it's absolutely true. Okay? And so this is done on purpose. So when we talk about, when you refer to bad white people, I just say these are people who have been kept away for generations, kept away from the truth and are very, very focused on their narrative. And they're not really willing to give up their narrative. But now yes, there are people we would consider criminal. Some of them are in Congress and Senate. And criminal, not, violence happens in many different ways. And people want to say, violence is only physical aggression, but you just study, for example, women in this country and having been to be protected from violence in their marriage or their relationships. It used to be that there was no such thing as domestic violence. No such thing.
Because there was the rule of thumb.
That's right. If you go back to many, many centuries ago, when they wanted to, they had a certain place for women across many religions, okay? And for example, women could not sing or speak in church, okay? And even today, some religions, women cannot be pastors. You see, so this is a male idea, but it is put in as Sean said, so this is society, and then somehow is inculcated into the church, and then they come up with these rules. Okay, so I'm saying that to say that there are the idea of education, there was a reason why, okay? Some had to do with, I would say, the main issue is power. This country was based on power. The Constitution was for white male landowners. So it didn't include anybody in here unless you own property and you're a man. So the rest of us, especially black people, we weren't even people. And so when you look at that and say, well, where did that come from? In God we trust. So they put that on top of it. This is the natural order, as the science at the time, when we talked about science and their role the last time. Yeah, science, we get all of these, they got all their ideas, and all the scientists were male. So you're going to get, all of this is like put together. And so the rules that we have now, they're male dominated. Someone showed me a picture of the committee in a special committee that determines women's health care. And they're all white males.
Yes.
So that gives you some idea, because all white males, and they're the ones, and wealthy white males, and they're the ones that are going to determine women's health care. There were no women there of any color on that board, and that's today.
Not today. I think we're working on that, and that things are changing, and we need to celebrate that.
Things are changing. There are changes. This is what I found, especially as a black person, that whatever move we make, it's like one step forward and 2 steps back. And the 2 steps back, that's the pushback. Remember we had the Tea Party, this is an example. Remember we had the Tea Party? And remember all the arguments over whether President Obama was American? Evidently Hawaii is not one of our states. Okay, they seem to forget those little details. Okay, so there's the pushback from his 8 years of presidency. I mean, the Republicans came out right away and said, we will oppose everything that he wants to push through. Okay, and so, and there's also the big pushback, of course, was the never again. Okay, so we had this black president, you know, oh my God, we've survived, right? Never again. So the pushback, these other Tea Party was something. So look at the pushback that happened. We got Trump. Okay? And Trump was an example of psychologically where people really were. So they believe that black advancement takes something away from white people. That's where we are. That is the truth right now. So the pushback from President Obama was all the anger, all these angry white men, okay, was we're going to get behind someone like Donald Trump, okay, because he represents for us all the things that we're angry about, and he can fix them, when in reality, ex-President Trump only cared about himself and his white, very wealthy friends. So if you look at what policies he had, everything was about breaks for wealthy people. Okay, but that was the pushback from having a black president. Unfortunately, what many of the conscious white people, they were, oh, hooray, hooray, you know, we're in the post-racial era, which I thought was the most ridiculous thing. Why? Because we have a black president? What about the rest of they keep saying we're only 12%, but I know we're more than 12% of black people in this country. Those conditions remain the same for the most part. And so, because people kind of went to sleep, the black president, work is over. And then that allowed someone like Donald Trump to come in for all the angry white people who feel that they have been disenfranchised. And because of black people, for some reason. It's always easy to blame black people for everything. And so this was a great opportunity. I mean, I'm always, an example of that is they're taking our jobs.
Yeah.
Now, why were they your job in the first place? You know, did you interview for it? Were you hired? No.
Did you want it?
Did you even want it? Yeah, right. Did you even want it? But that's an example. That's an example of that. You know, angry people. It's like, be angry at the corporations who took all of your jobs and sent them overseas because it was cheaper. They're the ones that, but no, is that black people have always been a target for hundreds of years. And so we have to, this is about waking up to all of this. And when we talk about being a accomplice. Yes, I'm going to write that down, but that's a much better word because it's more of an action word. To be an accomplice means to really understand what the job is and really understand what the game is. If you don't understand, I heard someone tell me he didn't think that gerrymandering or some of these new voting laws were bad. It was just protecting us. You know, but not understanding who's the target of those laws.
Yes.
That's where you guys have to be. You have to see what lies underneath the rhetoric.
Yes.
You see, what is underneath all the innocence that appears, the way they say, like in Florida, I think DeSantis said that Black history in the schools, well, that it just wasn't that important. It wasn't vital. It wasn't important. And a course that they were teaching, they're erasing the race of Rosa Parks. Then what was all the hoopla about her? I mean, it doesn't even make any sense. Why, what was all the hoopla about her, wanting to, what did she get arrested for? Because there was a rule that said that Black people have to sit in the back of the bus.
Right.
So if you erase her race, that she was a Black woman, it doesn't even make any sense. But that's what they want to teach your children now. So this whole idea of, I think Dr. Patricia Rose talked about, besides structural racism, she talked about this blindness idea. And that's how we're going to solve the problems in the country, by pretending that race or any of the racial problems do not exist. So that means there would be no accounting for surveys or anything like that about racial differences. So that way we'll just be, blind, but that is not a solution, but people have fallen for that now. That's how they were able to basically destroy the civil rights, the Voting Rights Act. There's a part, I think it's Section B, that said, states like Georgia and Alabama, etc. There was a part in that section that said if they were going to change their voting laws in their state, then they had to go through this committee in the government to make sure that it was not racially discriminatory. And so they erased that part out of the bill. So basically the bill, that was the only teeth in the Voting Rights Act.
You're talking about when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that it was no longer enforceable because those racist voting practices have been fixed.
Exactly.
Right.
Who's that? Roberts. He was the deciding on that, and that's what he said.
Yeah.
He said this data is old, as if age has anything to do with it. All of this with the injustices are still going on, but this data is old, and these states, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, and since it's old, we can't use that. And surely, and he's using terms like that, surely things have changed. And it was Holden versus Shelby County. Eric Holder, who was our Attorney General under President Obama, he's the one that sued, and he lost that. And the minute, I think it was 2013, 2014, and the minute that the ruling came down, like an hour later, Texas was changing its laws. So that's how, so if you want to know, okay, so how did we get to this particular part? We knew that Dr. Martin Luther King was working, years to get to that point in 1965, and then in 2014 it was turned back. So you have to understand what you're up against. So you have Robert saying it's not necessary anymore. Color blindness is what so they're using that concept of color blindness. Dr. Rose has a video on that. Structural racism and color blindness. Really understand what that is. A very simple example is when someone says, well, I don't care if you're white or red or green or purple. First, people don't come in colors. There are no green people, all right? But that is an example of color blindness. We're going to erase, or I don't see you as black. Well, that's funny. Every morning when I get up, that's what I see. You don't, and so that's another way of saying, so here are some people who are trying to show how anti-racist they are by making a comment like that, and it's really insulting. It's very insulting, because what you're saying is, you don't see me. You don't acknowledge me. Okay? And so...
I'm not saying that since I don't see color, then everything's okay.
Yes, exactly.
So there's no accountability, there's nothing to be done.
Exactly. That's color blindness. And they are putting it into the law. So this is what all this is about. You have to understand. So how do we get this great law, Voting Rights Act, all that work, blood, sweat, tears, and death, and then the pushback came in 2013, 2014 by the Supreme Court. All your work, we're going to take out the only teeth in that bill, we're going to take it out. And that's how we got from 2014 to now. So that left all those states, they can do their gerrymandering, pass these terrible voting laws, etc. That's how we got there. Okay, so just learning the history, so pay attention to whatever laws they're passing and the reasoning for it, and then and you can do that throughout history, and then see the effect. What was the end result of that? And that happened fast.
Just to speak to that, the current Ohio law, which is in the courts right now, we'll see what happens there, but that's a terrible law, and it's all about restricting the vote of African Americans. It's all designed that way. You have to have a voter ID. You have to, they're restricting the hours, the after hours, the weekend hours. The souls, the whole Sunday souls to the polls. Oh, it's not going to be open Sunday. All of this is so designed to suppress the African American vote. And it's so blatantly obvious, but so many people don't pay attention to politics. I hate it when people say, oh, I don't pay attention to politics. Politics is your life, you know what I mean? If you don't pay attention to what they're doing, then, it's a substance of our existence, And it's a terrible law, and if it does, they rule in favor to let it proceed, there's going to have to be all hands on deck to get African Americans to the polls and help them get voter IDs. Just think about being a poor African American person or whoever. You have to get a driver's license. You don't know where your birth certificate is. You don't know, you know what I mean? Or you have to get there to even get it. All the work that's going to have to go into getting people IDs.
But at the same time, we need to tell our black folks to be whatever law they're going to put across. We need to advocate for them. If they want ID, start on time, find a way to get this ID. Or if they don't want you to go out and vote on Sunday, if that's what they are in, let's find another channel and go and vote.
Yes.
At the same time, we need to educate them. I know it's good to maintain the culture, but if that's what they are doing, then we need to find another way to beat them.
Yes.
It is not easy that way because in the case of getting the ID, as she already has said, I mean, the birth certificate may not be there. You don't have the requirements in order to get the state ID.
But you have cultural people. You were born here, there should be somebody to identify you to get your ID.
It should be automatic. I mean,
Yeah, if you don't
other
have the birth
countries
certificate, you can't get the state ID. You won't get it.
Well, I still feel like we need to find a way to educate them and start on time, you know,
Absolutely.
and get those things.
There is an
Some of them
organization
have.
called Vote Writers that is going to activate.
Until we can get enough people to the polls, get enough people into the positions to change all of this garbage back to making it easy for people to get their ID, right?
Well-
All by design, but if we don't get the people to the polls, it all continues the same, on the same worse and worse and worse path.
Well, unfortunately, that'll have to be the last comment. I could sit here and
Oh, yes.
be with all of you for just hours. But, you know, they're gonna run me out of town if I don't stop. So what I'll do is I'll contact all of you and let you know when our next get-together is going to be, our next class. Hopefully I can have it in June. Let's see, we have how many? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so we'll have approximately 20, 25 people. So if we can't have it, you know, in here, whatever, he was telling me that
Beautiful.
this is a great one, but there are other groups that are using the spaces and that, so I'll let you know, okay? You go ahead and email me, and I will have my list of people, and then I will, as soon as I find out, I will email all of you and let you know when we'll meet again and what room. Okay, hopefully it's June, but I don't know. Okay?
Thank you.
All right.